You are listening to PowerScore's Law Practices podcast series. Today's topic is the difference between large and small law firms. Today's guests are Vicki Huebner, Assistant Dean of Law Career Services at Santa Clara University School of Law, Abby Armstrong, Director of the Office of Career Services at Vermont Law School, and Ellie Mistal, Editor of AboveTheLaw.com. Ellie Mistal says the main differences between large and small law firms are the size and the fact you might or might not know everyone you work with.
Well, I mean, size for one thing, right? And that actually makes a huge difference because it really makes a difference as far as being able to kind of know all of your colleagues and know all of the people you work with versus not. And so, we have a new series of columns on Above the Law about small law firms specifically, and it really goes into the different kinds of cultures, the different things you can expect in small law firm situations versus big law situations, the different hiring practices and all that. And a lot of it, what it really comes down to is fit. I mean, that's probably the major difference, is that fit becomes much more important at the smaller of a law firm it is. At a big law firm, you kind of, and I don't say this as pejoratively as it's going to sound, but you are kind of a cog. You are, somewhat replaceable. They're looking for you as a kind of man or woman hour more than your personal qualities necessarily. At a small law firm, that really gets flipped.
Vicki Huebner says some main differences between large and small law firms can be the size of the support staff, the type of law that is practiced, and in smaller firms, younger associates are able to do more.
I think some of the differences are obviously, there's a difference between a big environment where you have a lot of people around you and a lot of support staff and administrative staff and all of the procedures, processes, bureaucracies that go into a large organization. And then when you go to the polar opposite and you're, in a small organization, that right there is going to be one difference, because you're probably not going to find all of these formalized processes. You may have some support people around you. It's not going to be nearly as extensive. You're not going to have whole departments dedicated to administrative work. And certainly as a lawyer in a smaller firm, there's some work you're going to do that might have been handled by someone administratively at a larger firm, but you're going to be doing it anyway. And one of the examples I'll use with students is that back when I was in practice, I worked for both a big firm and for a little firm. And the little firm, when we were getting ready to go to trial, I can remember being there on a Friday night, and our secretary, we had a secretary, but she'd already gone home from work, and someone had to go Xerox some documents we were going to take into trial, and there were all the attorneys there working, and I was the most junior, and so I was the one who was at the Xerox machine Xeroxing away, because that work just had to be done. It had to be done right then and there at that moment, and that's kind of the way the cookie crumbled. You might find a difference in the type of law that gets practiced. For instance, there's some practice areas that you just don't see handled at large law firms. Family law, is a classic example. So if there's certain types of work you want to do, you're probably going to be finding that will be handled with a lot more frequency at a smaller firm or exclusively at a smaller firm. And then I think that something else about a smaller firm is that a small firm, because it's small, depending on who's working there, can be one of those environments where I think as a young associate, you can really be involved in a lot of different aspects of the law and in the development and the workings of that firm that you may not get the chance to at a larger firm. And it has to again go to, I think it's the size issue and the corporatization of that practice. So at a bigger firm, an associate might get involved with being on a large team and getting involved with one small aspect of the work associated with that team. Whereas at a smaller organization, and it depends on how small it is, but if you go really small, you find yourself with assignments that might be more far-ranging and wide-ranging just because the nature of the team is that it's smaller.
Abby Armstrong believes the main differences are the entrance requirements, such as large law firms looking for top students, while smaller firms look for sophisticated members of the community.
In order to secure a position with a large law firm, typically they are looking for top students. Certainly, top students from from non-top 50 law schools in the country. So in general, if you're coming from a school like Vermont Law School or a school that is not as highly ranked as the Ivy League schools and the University of Chicago's and whatnot, then they are extremely competitive, and they are looking for students who are typically in the top 10 in the class, members of a law journal, the achievers. And that tends to be the major criteria that our students are evaluated on. As opposed, I think that's true for most schools, as opposed to smaller law firms that are looking for people who are members of the community in which the firm is located, because that person's going to have ties to businesses, ties to people, and those are potential clients. So the smaller the firm, the more you have to really be out there hustling to try to make sure you maintain relationships with people that might need your services. So there's less of an emphasis on the grade point average and class rank, and more of an emphasis on commitment to that geographic location, writing skills, personality, ability to get along with people in the office, because you tend to be in closer quarters with people. Much more a substantive familiarity with, if it's a firm that does a lot of family law, then they want you to know how to handle a divorce. Not just that you did well on the law school exam and your GPA is a 3.82.
Abby goes on to say that large law firms require students who are organized and self-sufficient, while small firms require students that are flexible.
I think the people who should consider large law firms are people who are very organized and efficient, because they tend to be demanding environments, and so you've gotta know that you're gonna put in your time. The vast majority of people who go to these large law firms don't stay in them to become partners. So they go and they get their skill training, they make a little money, and then they frequently transition out to jobs with attorney general offices, or they go to in-house counsel positions, or they go to teaching jobs. But certainly people who are organized and detail-oriented, because these are places that don't want you to make mistakes. And so if you're somebody who gets the job done well, but it takes you longer, then it's going to be a stressful environment. The smaller places, I think you've got to be someone who wants to be of that place, who very much wants to go to the Chamber of Commerce lunch, and coach a little league, and be involved in the different kinds of organizations that go on. And you've got to be somebody who can be a little flexible, because on Monday you might be dealing with an insurance car accident case. On Tuesday you might be dealing with a divorce. On Wednesday you might be dealing with a DUI. You're gonna have a variety of different types of cases that you're going to end up dealing with.
Vicki believes that someone who is interested in a lot of different practices of law should work in a smaller firm.
Oh, definitely someone who is, I think, a little bit more entrepreneurial, but not in the business sense of meaning that they need to start their own business, but in the sense of an entrepreneur has to be someone who can demonstrate the initiative to see something that needs to be done and just goes and does it. They invent something, they market something, they do a lot of different things. And I think that someone who really, somebody who's graduating from law school needs to have that sense of being able to be a little bit of a risk taker, needs to be able to see what needs to be done, and is willing to, with some they still ask for guidance, but they're able to run with it. And I think that's one of the most important factors that somebody needs to have. Because as a new graduate, they're still not going to have, they're not going to know everything about the substantive practice of law, or even a lot about it. They're still going to have a huge learning curve. And, attorneys know that they're going to work for, but there's something in your persona about the ability to know that even when you have a whole lot to learn, that you're willing to, see that something needs to be done or you think something needs to be done, and to ask whether or not that is indeed what needs to be done, and if so, to take the initiative to go do it.
And Ellie's advice for students is to look at firms where they are interested in the law the firm practices.
I mean, I think either it kind of depends on what you want out of your practice. I mean, I think that there's no any kind of graduate I think should look at a small law firm if that's the kind of law that they want to practice. I mean, obviously, if you want to do if you're kind of really interested in working for only the biggest clients on only the most extensive and important matters, you kind of only get that big law. So that would be a reason to go in that direction. Obviously, big laws tends to pay more. But one of the other things that we've been doing with our columns is they've been showing that if you're a successful small lawyer, by the time they do the obituary on your career, you will make quite a bit of money.
Ellie also says that when deciding on what law firm size to consider, you should think about if you want a big and fast environment where you're required to pay your dues, or a slower daily schedule.
I wouldn't say there's so much a difference in what they practice. It's more of a difference in how they practice it. Like I said, big law tends to be more focused on just the kind of rote man hours necessary to complete one of these, massive complex litigations or, massive multi-million or billion-dollar deals. Lawyers at small law firms don't have to do that kind of work, mainly because their cases aren't that huge. So it's more of a difference in how they go about practicing as opposed to what they practice. You're still going to have small law firm lawyers who work on litigations and, smaller deals and that kind of stuff.
Abby goes on to say that larger firms offer more money and normally a great relationship with a mentor, where a small law firm will require a risk taker and hustler.
Well, you make a lot more money initially at the large places. I mean, that's certainly the big draw for that. You see a firm that starts at $160,000 a year, or $130,000 a year. That's very enticing to students with large debt, and so that's certainly a payoff. I think for some of the people who go to those places, they get a great relationship with a mentor. I don't think that happens across the board. For some of them, there's a lot of resources. The work that they get to do is pretty sophisticated. There can be some very, very good lawyers that they get exposed to. Vermont Law School has a specialty in environmental law, so a lot of our students who go to large firms are going to firms with sophisticated environmental and energy practices. And there's some cutting-edge stuff that goes on there. So I think all of those are benefits. The benefits of the small firm are that, if you are someone who is a bit of a hustler, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, you're a risk taker and you're a go-getter and you're out there willing to introduce yourself to people, and you march to the beat of your own drum, you can set up a nice little practice and have a good life and have the flexibility that you want to bring to that. You make far less money initially, but the capacity is there to make money over time, and ultimately be in a position where I think you can, if your son or daughter is in a play at 2:00 in the afternoon, you can go to that, and then go back to work afterwards. I think the downside of the large law firm is it's a much more rigid environment, and the expectation of the amount that you're going to have to bill is significant. And for a lot of people, that's the golden handcuffs. They make a lot of money, but their life is not their own. And on the small firm, they don't make a lot of money, but I think they feel like, they hopefully it's a little bit more humane.
Ellie finishes his comments by saying that the job market is soft, so students aren't deciding where to work normally. They're taking jobs that are offered to them. However, if you're able to choose, he believes asking yourself if you like the people you work with is very important.
Just saying, I would be hesitant to put a strict, pro-con kind of list on the thing. There are people who will thrive in a larger firm environment where they're kind of more nameless and faceless, and they can sit in their office and be left alone to do their work without anybody bothering them or maybe even knowing who they are. There are people who will not like that, who want to be more connected. There are people who will thrive at kind of generating business. And while, certainly, let's take a rainmaker. A rainmaker is going to be useful in any kind of firm, in any kind of practice, anywhere in the country. But if you kind of have those natural rainmaking skills, you might more quickly be able to use those skills to your financial benefit, where your business generation skills are more highly valued more quickly than at a bigger firm where you have to kind of pay your dues and work your way up the ladder to the point where you're allowed to exhibit your rainmaking ability. So again, I want to do it as just a kind of pro-con thing. It's more understanding what you want out of your own practice, and then finding a firm that meets that most closely fits what you want to do.
Vicki finishes by saying that students should go speak with attorneys in both size law firms and get a gauge of what their daily lives will be like.
Well, one of the biggest pieces of advice I have for students is to actually go talk to people who are in those practices, and because it's great to read things, it's great to come talk to me. It's another thing to talk to someone who's currently involved in it, to really get that sense where you talk to someone and you have that internal moment where you either talk to them and you think, this is not at all what I would want to do, or you get really excited by what they're doing and you want to be part of that as well. And there isn't a lot of substitutes for that. So, yeah. So anyway, I recommend that students talk to somebody. A school like ours that's been around for now 100 years has a fairly extensive alumni base, and we have a very large alumni base around the school, the geographic region of the school. And so for a student that's, looking for an attorney who's in close geographic proximity to go talk to, we have a lot of graduates. We have a lot of graduates who said that they're happy to talk to students whenever, and so, we're happy to try to connect our students with people who might be somebody that would help them with making some decisions about how best to orient themselves towards their careers.
And finally, Abby says that students should write their own rules and figure out what legal environment is best for them.
I guess what I would make sure they would want to know is, for large law firms, the primary way that students are recruited into the large firms is through their summer associate programs during law school. But we have many, many more, and that's when they are at their most competitive. We have many, many more who go in as lateral hires 3, 4, 5, years after school, when they've already gotten experience in some other way. So the dream of going to the big law firm and being in that kind of environment and making a decent amount of money and having the prestige that goes with that may be foreclosed to people when they're students because of how competitive the summer associate programs are. But there's still options down the road, if they become really well schooled in a particular area of law. They work on some big cases. They can be sought after, and we've had that happen with our students. So never to give up if the goal is really to go to the big firm. In terms of the small firm, I think people don't realize that you can actually get to a point where you can write your own ticket in that environment, where you can make a decent amount of money, live where you want to live, have flexibility in terms of the kind of schedule you want to have, and ultimately work towards the goal of working with people that you really want to work with, either with the firm that you begin with or you develop your own firm with friends, etc.
Thank you for listening to PowerScore's podcast series. If you want more information on PowerScore's podcasts or services, please visit PowerScore.com, or you can call 1-800-545-1750.